What's up, ladies? I hope you guys are doing well. I am actually doing very well because today is one of the warmest days that we've had so far this winter. And I honestly feel like spring is here. I don't know if it's sprung fully yet, but it feels very springy today. So I'm very grateful for that and enjoying the beautiful sunny day. I hope that y'all are doing okay after last week's conversation. I hope that it sparked some needed reflection and maybe some conversations. We're going to continue to talk about things that you can do to mentally and emotionally prepare for pregnancy and overall motherhood. And today we're going to be talking about two specific things. The first thing is going to be stress and how we can cope with it. And then the second thing is going to be kind of more external and how we interact with our partner and some of the questions that we need to be asking and topics that we need to be discussing when it comes to planning out parenthood together. So let's get into the episode. Okay, so just to recap, in this series, what we're doing is going from internal focus to external focus. And last week, I spent a lot of time talking about some of the internal kind of motivators and things that drive you wanting to be a mother in the first place. So one of the first questions that I addressed was, why do you want to have a baby? That's a great question to start with. And then we also talked about whether or not we were mentally ready to have a baby and just kind of talking about all the things that come with motherhood and things that you don't necessarily think of first. This week, we're going to continue to do that, as I said in the intro. And today, we're going to be talking about specifically stress, how we like how much stress we have, how we cope with stress, some of the coping strategies that are possible, and then kind of planning how we can manage it once the baby arrives. And so, first, I think it's important to look at what kind of stressors there are. I think often adults are capable of understanding emotions, right? So, like, happy, sad, frustrated, and all these things. What I find is that most adults don't truly have a gauge on some more intricate emotions, like perhaps abandonment, resentment. Sometimes people have, in general, issues identifying when they are overwhelmed. This is especially true for people who maybe have grown up in a family where they naturally maybe have taken on more than what they should as a child. And so they're not good at identifying what their limits are. And so sometimes it can be hard to identify all the ways in which you are actually stressed. There are a variety of stressors, and there are different types. So there can be physical stress, for example, and that might look like overexertion, like physically, maybe you're doing too much, you're putting too much demand on your body. There could be some sort of trauma. So maybe you have gotten injured in some way, or, maybe you're sick and your body is fighting off some sort of illness or disease. There can also be nutritional stress. So you may not be eating the right things, and so your body is being stretched. It's not getting the proper nutrition. And so it has a demand on it that it can't fulfill because of these sort of nutritional deficiencies. Going along with that, if you are deficient in sleep, that's another stress. And that's going to be one that you can almost guarantee is going to happen when you have a baby, just because babies don't sleep well. I mean, there's no way around it. This is just a part of being an infant, that you're not going to have the same sort of patterns that an adult has. So a baby is going to wake up often. And so a mother can almost guarantee, if nothing else, that she's going to lose the sleep that she had before she was pregnant. Now, there are some great sleepers out there that come out the womb sleeping like champs. But even still, even the best sleepers are not going to give you consistently 8, 9 hours of sleep every night in the beginning. There can also be psychological stressors, and that might be emotions based. So if you're dealing with some sort of mental health issues, so maybe anxiety, panic attacks, depression, that is going to be psychologically stressing for you. If you deal with perfectionism, for example, maybe you have an overactive sort of manager in your body that is constantly telling you that you need to be perfect, that you need to work so that everything is great. Well, that's going to stress you out. And then there could be also a feeling in the opposite direction of maybe you feel out of control with your life, and that is causing you stress. There can also be psychosocial stress, and that is more in line with, your relationships with others. So let's say that I'm going to use mother as an example because this is what we're talking about. A potential psychosocial stressor for a mother could be lack of support. So mothers need a lot of help. And if they don't get that help, especially if you had a C-section or if you are breastfeeding and you need that additional kind of help when you're constantly feeding the baby in the beginning, if you don't have access to that support, that can be a stressor. And then the typical marriage difficulties can also be a stressor. So maybe if you guys are not communicating well, or maybe your partner lost their job, or they're not really understanding how to be a good co-parent, all of those things can be stressors. Now, as I was naming some of the types of stress, I was already kind of labeling and identifying several ways in which a baby is going to cause stress. So I'm going to just go ahead and say it that babies equal stress. Like, it's just inherent. I'm not trying to like make it be scary, but when we think about the different types of stress, and now that you can identify them a little bit better, there are going to be natural stressors that are kind of unavoidable, like the sleep, for example. You may also feel physically overexerted, especially if you had a C-section, because you have like scars and things that you literally need to heal before you can physically do certain things. But just in general, the act of birth, no matter how the baby is born, is going to take a toll on your body. It's like running a marathon, and there's going to be a period of time where you need to recover from that. And so in the beginning, when your body is, your uterus is shrinking back down to size and you're still bleeding and the milk is coming in for the baby, you're exhausted because maybe labor was very long and tiring. And if you were in the hospital, maybe you didn't get a lot of sleep. And then if you had a home birth, the same thing is true. Just the act of having a new baby after birth and like having to take care of them is physically exhausting. So you can almost guarantee you're going to feel some sort of physical stress in some way. You may also experience some hormonal shifts that may cause various like anxiety, especially if you're a new mother. You've never taken care of a baby before. And so you can probably guarantee that there's going to be some fear, some worry, some anxiety about, are you doing the right thing? Is your baby okay? Are they breathing? We all have been there. Let me say that. Write this part down. I know every single mother that I've talked to who has said they've spent time looking over the bassinet or wherever that baby is sleeping and checking to see if they're breathing. So you're probably going to do it too. It's a natural thing. Mothers, especially the first time around, are just constantly making sure their baby is alive. And I feel like it's biologically like designed to be that way. We are naturally going to worry and make sure that our babies are safe, and that's okay. That's what we're supposed to do. We're their mothers. We're supposed to keep them alive, and that's going to be our main focus in the beginning. Like, are you okay? Another thing that you may encounter is that marital, sort of partner issue. I'm going to be honest. If you're a new mom, your partner's probably a new mom. Not a new mom. If you're a new mom, your partner's probably a new dad too. And so I'm going to be honest with you. Like, men have no clue how to take care of babies. Like, you might find a gym who knows what he's doing because maybe he took care of his younger siblings or a cousin or something, but the vast majority of them have no idea what they're doing. And so naturally, you're going to be the leader there because your instincts are going to kick in, and maternal instincts are beautiful and amazing and strong, and daddy instincts are not the same thing. So you're going to be the leader in taking care of your child. And if you expect things out of them that they just can't do, that might cause some strife. And then just in general, they're going to make mistakes just like you, and that's going to cause some strife. I feel like having a baby puts even the best relationships in a difficult position. I think it's just natural, again, because of the stressors. Like, you're not going to be sleeping, they're not going to be sleeping. Maybe they haven't slept when you were in the hospital, and maybe, you guys aren't getting the best possible nutrition because no one can cook because everyone is taking care of the baby. And so everyone's going to be a little bit stressed out. And so that's going to add to the relational kind of tension. It doesn't have to, and we're going to talk about that. But I'm just kind of bringing up all the ways in which a baby will naturally just kind of lead to, stress. All right. So we talked about what the stressors are and kind of how it's inevitable. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because stress leads to health issues. There are plenty of studies out there that equate stress to decline in health. Now, sometimes if you are at a level where perhaps your emotional, like psychological stress is at a peak, you might end up seeing psychosomatic issues. And basically, what that means is the psychological part will start to manifest in physical symptoms. So you might see a decrease in your overall immune functioning. So you may start to get sick more often, maybe like with colds and just kind of like naggy issues. You may also see a hormonal imbalance, and I'm not talking about kind of like estrogen and testosterone. I'm talking about cortisol and other things that kind of drive the ship, thyroid things, like those sort of imbalances that are actually more impactful in my opinion. So if you're constantly having cortisol running in your body, cortisol is the stress hormone. It's kind of telling your body that you are in a dangerous situation. So cortisol will spike if there's a predator around, for example. So it's kind of like that fight or flight. And if you're constantly having that go, what might happen is you can kind of exhaust the glands that secrete cortisol, and then that can cause kind of a global problem. There are several doctors who are speculating that the disease known as fibromyalgia is actually caused by a kind of blowout in the adrenal gland, which is the gland that secretes cortisol. So there's a lot of things that can go wrong with your body when you are at a heightened level of stress for too long. So, because of that, and because you want to stay healthy and take care of your baby and your children for as long as possible and be around for as long as possible, as healthy as possible, we want to talk about how you manage stress now, right? So, how do you manage stress before you have a child? What are some of the things that you do? I can't name them because I'm not you, but I'm going to pose the question so that you can be thinking about it now. What are some of the things that are coping skills for you? What can be helpful to you? Is it self-care? Is it exercise? Is it sex? I don't know. What is it that helps you to decrease your stress? Plan them for when you inevitably do have a baby and the stress appears. So, what does that look like? You can practice, like, so let's say that your stress relief is self-care. Okay. I'm going to guarantee you right now that you're not going to have, loads of time to go to the spa, or go get your nails done, or get your hair done, or whatever your self care is. So you might need to start to play around with quick ways to get your self care done. So one of the things that I do is I like to do a facial steam, and I'm not getting a whole facial, right? But what I'll do is boil some water. I'll get a couple of, just loose flowers that I have that I've saved from the garden or, wherever, and I'll put it in a bowl, and it'll create like a herbal little bath or whatever. And then I take a towel, put it over my head, and then I just lean over that steamy bowl, and I do it for like 5 to 10 minutes, not really that long. And it's a really nice refresher. It makes me feel good. It makes my skin feel soft. It smells good. And it's very quick. It doesn't take very long. And it's something that I could do pretty quickly to just get away for a second and do something nice for myself. So those are the kind of things that you can kind of think about, that you can kind of sneak away and make time to reduce your stress level when the babies come. One thing that I wanted to point out was that a lot of women use things like wine to, kind of decompress. So I always hear like, oh, a glass of wine. Oh, I'm going to go get drinks. That's fine. But just keep in mind that when you get pregnant, you can't do that. And then when you're breastfeeding, it's not going to be as simple. Like you can definitely drink when you're breastfeeding, safely. I'm not going to get into, the logistics of it or like the ethical background or whatever, but it's possible to drink and breastfeed. You don't have to do it at the same time, but there's ways around it. But with that being said, you can't do it all the time. You can't be getting drunk all the time. You can't, like, it's just not possible. So there's going to be a limitation to the alcohol and how you use it to decompress. And similarly, if you're someone who smokes or, cigarettes or weed or whatever, those kind of things are going to be limited when you're pregnant for sure. And then even afterward, it's just not going to look the same for a pretty long time. So think about healthy, non-substance related ways that you can manage and reduce your stress now, and then start to put it into practice. If you naturally go for that glass of wine after a long day of work, well, let's just pretend that you're pregnant. You don't have that glass of wine. What are you going to do? What's your alternative? All right, let's move on. I've done enough of the stress talk. I think you guys get it. So now we're going to move on to talking about what I call partner discovery. I like that name because I was listening to something recently, and it had to do with like lawyers and the law. And they were talking about how when someone is going into court, there's a period of discovery, and everything, like all of their information, all of their assets, their work, their phone logs, literally everything is open for discovery. And I found that to be interesting. And I like it for when we talk about our relationships. This is a good time to have a discovery with your partner about all of the things that come along with trying to get pregnant, pregnancy, birth, parenthood, how you want to raise your kids, the financial decision, literally everything. Literally everything. If you're not pregnant yet, the best place to start would be to be sure that your partner is ready to get pregnant, right? So if you're really interested in it and, this is what you desire, you want to have lots of talks with them leading up to it, to make sure that they're ready too. And this is a good time to maybe let them listen to last week's episode, because I think when we talk about ready, it's not a matter of, yes, I want a baby. There are other parts that come along with it that they need to think about too. So how do they, what do they think about being the sole responsible party for this baby? All of the same questions that I asked last week are a good place for them to start as well, to start to internally pay attention to their own, kind of like things that make them tick and what makes them run. They need to think about that too, because all of the same ways that motherhood shines a light on your dark spots, fatherhood does the same exact thing. Okay. So they're going to be having to kind of cope and realize what they're capable of doing in terms of being a father. Now, there's a great article that I found by Pure Wow. I'm going to put it in the show notes. And it's called The 28 Uncomfortable Questions You and Your Partner Have to Ask. And those were some really good questions on there. I encourage you to look into it. But one of the best questions, and I think that relates to what we're talking about today, is how do you two as a unit handle stress and sort of conflict resolution? This one kind of makes me think of what your communication skills are, which was one of the questions I asked last week that we didn't get to. So this is a good time to kind of talk about it. Communication is a number one priority when it comes to parenthood. I think it's a number one priority when it comes to marriage in general, but especially when it comes to parenthood, you have to be an incredibly effective and efficient communicator to be good co-parents. And by co-parents, I mean, parents that are in the same house. We're not talking about baby daddies and all that stuff. But I think that's also, important there. But we're talking about the same household. Even then, you need to be incredibly good at communicating. Why do I say that? Well, if you have limited amounts of time where you guys can communicate, which is going to be true, especially if the two of you are working parents with a small child, like your time is going to be very precious and limited when you guys can actually sit there and talk to each other without the children present. Now, that's a rule that my husband and I have, and I'm realizing it as I say it out loud. We don't typically talk like in depth about important things when the children are around. So that's kind of what I mean. Like your time's going to be limited because you're always with your kids unless they go to sleep. But even let's take a step back. Actually, even when it's not an in-depth talk, you still need to be efficient because let's say that you are giving your baby a bath, right? And you're in the bathroom and you're doing the bath and your husband's out in the wherever. And you really need something, but you can't leave your baby in the bath, but you don't want to take them out. And you need to call them over and you need to say what you need like right away. Even then, it would require you to be pretty efficient, like calling him over, saying exactly what you need, telling them where it is in the house, explaining it. Like you don't have time to kind of talk around. So even there, I feel like it's important to be efficient and effective in how you communicate. But what I want you to do when thinking about this is how do you guys communicate right now? And how do you handle stress and conflict, right? So if you haven't had that put to the test, God bless you. And I want that relationship because, wow, none of that has happened to you. And that's amazing. But most of us have. Think about those times when you guys were in conflict and how did it go? Was it peaceful? Was it loud and ridiculous? How did y'all kind of come to a conclusion and resolve that conflict? Those are some of the things to think about. And more specifically, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. When you are bothered by something, or maybe it's just something that's important to you or whatever, do you kind of drag things out? So like, do you kind of drag your feet when it comes to talking to people in general? And then specifically, do you drag things out when it comes to talking to your partner? Maybe do you wait like a couple of days and kind of like talk about things slowly? Are there things that you totally avoid saying? And the same thing is true for them. Like that's a question that they need to ask themselves. Are they avoidant when something is important to them or bothering them? Those are things that may end up being challenging in a parenting relationship because again, time is really precious. And if you're kind of like beating around the bush with things, it's just not an effective way to communicate. And so you want to be mindful of that and start to work towards changing it if you have the opportunity to do this stuff before a baby comes. Now, with that being said, avoiding things and dragging them out is definitely challenging, but in the converse, if you are someone who unloads everything all the time, so like you don't hold anything back and you say what you think like immediately, and there's no sort of impulse control, that can also be problematic. And I'm specifically thinking about like that tendency to nag. Like it kind of comes hand in hand where you just can't help but bring up whatever you have as a problem, like right then and there. That can also be an issue. And especially like if your partner is tired, whether this is the husband or the wife that I'm talking to, but like for both sides, if you guys are tired and overexerted and stressed, and then you have a partner who just can't help but bring up stuff all the time, like at the most inappropriate moment. So like maybe you're getting ready to go to bed after a long day of work, and you just got the baby down, the baby's been crying for hours and you're exhausted. And then your partner comes in and is like, you know what? I want to talk about how you didn't sweep the floor today. I'm tired of you not sweeping the floor. Like, can you imagine? Can you imagine that person who impulsively picks the terrible time to bring up something that you don't do? Like, we can't exist with those people either. Like, we can't live in a relationship like that as parents, because it's going to be exhausting and problematic, and you're going to be fighting all the time. So think about it. It could be both ways, whether you avoid or you bring it up. Like, there has to be a happy medium. And again, practice that now because you have the opportunity to. Okay, enough of that. The last thing I'm going to leave you with is going along with this relationship thing. And I'm going to say this. The biggest question that you're going to want to ask is, how can you prioritize your relationship? One of the best tips that I've gotten from a married couple is that a child is a product of your marriage and a product of your love. So, the typical saying when they say like, where do babies come from? And then they're like, well, when a man and a woman love each other. That's so true, right? When a man and a woman love each other, they make a baby. And you have to keep that in mind when, the babies come and you're dealing with your partner. Your child is a product of your marriage. It's a product of your love. So the first priority is your relationship. Not everybody is going to be happy about that. Not everybody's going to want to hear that, because I know how much mothers love to say they love their babies more than anything else, more than their partners, more than everything else. But you have to remember, you got into this relationship because you loved that person first. You loved your husband first, right? And you married him. And now you're making a baby with him. And so he still needs to be your priority. Okay. And I'll tell you why. Those children are going to leave you. They're going to abandon you one day. But if you take good care, that's not going to be true for him. So in all of the talks that I did about the stressors and all that stuff, you want to try to, as much as possible, make your relationship work. So the same way that you were kind of figuring out how to find your stress relief for yourself, you want to be doing the same things to maintain your relationship and make sure it doesn't have to like keep the heat, as far as like the sexual side, but just in general, you want to be prioritizing your alone time with your partner and making sure that their needs are being met as much as they can be. It's going to be difficult. There's no way around it, but just making sure that you guys are prioritizing each other in all of this kind of craziness. I promise you it's definitely worth it. I know when me and my husband started to realize that and put that at the forefront, our relationship only got better and better and better, even with, the addition of more children. So yeah, that's all I have for you today. It's a lot, but that's what I have for you today. So I hope that I have again inspired some more thoughts, giving you some homework. Hopefully you and your partner now have some homework that you can do together. Let me know if you have any questions. As always, there is a Q&A at the end of every podcast that you can fill out. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next episode.